It's Sunday, May 14, 2023. I'm Anthony Davis. Welcome to the Weekend Show, where we take a deep dive into the news of the week. You can support my work and get exclusive access to bonus content at patreon.com/5minutenews. Joining us today is attorney, former federal prosecutor, and former Republican Party official that now tracks and reports on the right wing. Ron Filipkowski, welcome back to the Weekend Show.
Thank you. Great to be back.
So you have a huge following on Twitter, and you love to call stuff out as you see it, and I'm a big fan, as you know, and we've spoken before about 5 or 6 months ago. There's an awful lot to talk about today, so just to kind of look ahead, if we get time, I do want to talk about George Santos, who's famous for fabricating his life story. He pleaded guilty on Wednesday to charges that he duped donors, stole from his campaign, and lied to Congress about being a millionaire. It's very hard to say this with a straight face, but it's, it's serious, but he just is remarkable. So we'll look at him. Also, House Republicans have unveiled what they say are records of $10 million in payments to members of the Biden family from foreign entities. We'll debunk that story. But first, and probably as expected, it's only fair that we look at what happened earlier this week when CNN bosses thought it was a good idea to give Donald Trump an hour and 10 minutes of cable news time to basically say whatever he wanted to say. This was the town hall that actually was more like a Trump campaign event, right? Like a televised rally. So you on Twitter have been quite critical of the way, not just the reason for doing it in the first place, which we'll talk about and is still kind of evades me, but also the way that the host, Caitlin Collins, kind of handled Donald Trump. Let me ask you, first of all, do you think she was the right choice for doing a show such as this?
Well, there's 3 parts to this. There's the format itself, there's her style, the way that she approached the interview, and there's the substance. So I take each thing separately. What you've asked me now is about the second, which is did she have the right style? And I tweeted this yesterday, and Lawrence O'Donnell actually picked up on this with his opening monologue. He follows me on Twitter, so I don't know if he saw it, and I influenced what he said. But what I pointed out was with somebody like Donald Trump, I think a traditional journalistic interview is inappropriate and not going to work. I mean, he's just this gaslight of lies, and you know what he's going to say, and he's going to interrupt and be boorish. The only way to approach an interview like that with Trump is as an attorney doing a cross-examination. And so I think really what you need is either a journalist who has those kinds of skills, and those kinds of skills are difficult to acquire. I've cross-examined thousands of people in courtrooms, and many people never get that skill. It's difficult. And so there are some journalists who have it. Jonathan Swan comes to mind. There's a few, but it's rare. And that's really what you have to have. She clearly does not have those skills. So she was just, from a stylistic standpoint, completely in over her head. I can just give you one example that I tweeted. Let's just take how to approach his statements about people dying of fentanyl. People are dying of fentanyl overdose, and it's because of our lax border enforcement. Well, here's the way I would have approached it. I would have said, Mr. Trump, you're quite proud of your accomplishments as president. You say that you secured the border. We had a very secure border when you were president. Isn't that true? Oh, yes. He'll let him brag about the border. Oh, yes. And you're saying that fentanyl deaths are caused by lax border security. That's what you're blaming the fentanyl deaths in the United States on, is our lax border. Yes. Well, why did we have 57,000 fentanyl deaths in your final year in office? What do you
You're
have to
effectively
say?
catching him. You're catching him in his own propaganda.
Yeah. Right. You could do it over and over and over like that. You don't go, do you believe that you won the 2020 election? No, It was fraudulent. It was stolen. Well, this whole notion of fact checking in real time is absurd with Donald Trump. I mean, what did she come back with? Well, you lost every court case. Well, this is not a cross-examination.
There was nothing clever about it. Like there was no kind of skill involved. But I think it's important though that we don't kind of rubbish Caitlin Collins too much, because she was just a lamb to the slaughter, right? She was put in a very difficult position, And she's, it's not her fault. If I was doing the casting, I probably would have put a man the same age as Donald Trump in there, so that there was some kind of equality in terms of that kind of to and fro, because we know that he doesn't respect women. We know that, maybe he asked for her, maybe he said, I'll only do it if there's a Republican audience and Caitlin Collins is the host.
I watched his interview when it was announced. Okay. And I think this is the other thing you have to have. You have to have somebody who pays attention to Donald Trump. And a lot of people don't like to do that. Where can you find Donald Trump over the last 2 years? Obscure podcasts, people that you've never heard of. Trump goes on these things every day.
All the time, yeah.
But people like Caitlin Collins don't watch those. People like me do. I watch all of them. So I'm very familiar with his line of attack and his approach, and I know what he's going to say. And I just think that a lot of journalists, the last time they've really seen or heard from Donald Trump very much was 2020. And that's their reference point when you have this cornucopia of things that he says every day that are just insane that they've completely ignored and that never come up. That's the frustrating thing for me is I hear all of these things that he says every single day, and yet the media seems oblivious to them. I don't know if it's a conscious decision to ignore what he's saying, but look, this is the front runner for the Republican nomination. You damn well better start paying attention.
But this is a problem, isn't it? That people were very tired of his voice and they were very tired of his rhetoric. And a lot of people just didn't want to hear it anymore. And right. I kept saying, never tire of this guy, because this is where the danger sets in, because he wants you to tire of him, because then, the apathy becomes a factor. And the reality is, you and I are the same. I'm addicted to Donald Trump. I think he is a disgusting fascist individual. And I'm not a Democrat and I don't get to vote in this country, but I believe in, I'm vehemently pro-democracy, and I believe that the Republicans deserve proper representation. And he is not it, because he is against America. He's not just against Democrats, he's against America. And so I watch, like you, and I absorb everything that he does, which means that people like us, and there's plenty of us, are far better placed to understand him, as the psychiatrists are doing and the body language experts, as well as the political analysts.
Yeah. On the substance, I mean, he puts out these darkroom policy videos, right, which he pre-records, and they're scripted, and they're mostly being written by Stephen Miller and right. with some Jason Miller mixed in. And they're very draconian, in
the shadows with the flags
stuff
behind him. Yeah, they're kind of dystopian videos. Yeah.
Yeah. And what he's saying is just one crazy thing after another. The media doesn't cover these. They don't put them on TV. I think the media has adopted this strategy of, we won't cover him, or we won't put his policy pronouncements out. But to me, the policy pronouncements are the craziest thing about Donald Trump right now. Yeah. I mean, when he says he wants to, as president, require every school district to hold an election every year for their local school principals. So you could have Joe Six-Pack construction worker run for the elementary school principal and get elected by the parents. This is what he says he wants to do. Now, let's set aside, you could ask, well, how does the president have the authority to do that? They have no authority to do it. But, the point is that Trump doesn't understand any of these policies that he's talking about because they're written by other people. So
he probably doesn't even pre-read them, does he? He probably just stands there and reads the teleprompter and doesn't know what he's reading. So if you ask him, well, how is this going to work exactly? He can't answer those questions. So why wouldn't you ask them? Yeah. It's so interesting that you really do have to become an expert on him to interview him. I think that's what you're saying. And she is definitely not an expert.
Well, her expertise is like 2020 expertise. It's not recent. So all they have to do is ask him about J6 and the elections and the court cases. And that's pretty much it. Well, that's pretty boring to most of the American people, to be honest with you.
Let's just go back a bit, because I want to talk about whether or not it was a good idea for CNN to even do this in the first place? And there's been a lot of backlash, there's been a lot of criticism, and the new boss of CNN has come out and he's kind of gone the other way with it. He's basically made a statement that suggested that this was great work. His name's Chris Licht. He saluted what he called a masterful performance by Caitlin Collins. And he said that you do not have to like the former president's answers, but you can't say that we didn't get them. That's his kind of argument here. How dangerous a decision was it to actually give him a platform in the first place?
I don't want to beat up on Caitlin Collins either. I do want to touch on that. I think what they did to Caitlin Collins, basically like making me go argue an immigration case. Okay, I'm a lawyer, but I don't know anything about immigration very much, so I'm not going to look very good. So I agree with what you said there. As far as platforming him, look, I'm someone who platforms Donald Trump, okay, and I get criticized a lot for doing that. But I do it in a I think, a selective, intelligent way that presents him in a less than favorable light. So I think I don't have an issue with them doing this, especially considering he's a front runner for the nomination. But I think the town hall idea was a horrible mistake. I mean, if you look at Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump, they have a very similar way of going about this. They like to intimidate the press. At the rallies, at their events, they like their fans to intimidate the press, to heckle them, to yell at them, to cheer their answers. DeSantis does it. Trump does it. And so you put her in the position where she's not only got to deal with Trump, she's got to deal with Trump fans heckling her and giving her a hard time and laughing. And that just made it incredibly more difficult. So you can't do like this traditional town hall like you could have done with John McCain with this guy and MAGA. It just doesn't work. And they should have understood that. Do you think the
audience was a stipulation of Trump also? Or do you think that was a decision by CNN to say, okay, because they claimed that there were some undecided voters in there, but I didn't really see that. And 7 of the 9 questions that were asked were all pretty much, kind of sycophantic questions towards the disgraced former president. Whose idea do you think that was? And what was the thinking behind it?
I think they probably ran different formats by him, and this is the one he latched on. I was about to say, I heard when it was first announced, he said he was very pleased with the choice of Caitlin Collins as the moderator. Yeah. So as soon as he said that, I said, "Oh, man, that's not good." So I think they may have run by him a number of different names of moderators and a number of different formats, and I think that they let him have a say in this. He seemed
because she did preempt the interview by saying, "Now we haven't prearranged any questions," and I thought that was interesting. And he said, "Yes, we haven't," and that I thought that was interesting because obviously I know about the way these shows work, and there's always a rider, there's always an agreement. So maybe he didn't, turn down any questions, but he did say, "I want this kind of audience and I want this host." So sometimes there's a bit of tit for tat.
Donald Trump's weakness is his recklessness and his lack of fear about those things. I believe that he didn't know what. Look, Donald Trump doesn't care. He takes impromptu questions. He'll stand up in a press conference and take 2 hours of questions as president. He's not afraid of that. So because he thinks that he can dominate the atmosphere, he can dominate the space. So I believe that part of it. I believe he knew he had a friendly crowd. He knew he had the right interviewer. He didn't care what the questions were. He was comfortable that he could handle it.
Let's just talk about the questions, because you've been writing some alternative questions on Twitter, which I've been completely I've just been enjoying them so much because, and you said, look, I'm not a journalist. This isn't my area of expertise, but it seems to me that there are some very simple questions that you can ask this guy that are going to enable you to kind of get the answers or at least expose him for having no idea about what it is. Let's just kind of pick a few of those of your favorites, because you put at least a dozen out. I mean, what would be how would you start with him?
Well, I would start with the question I started out with about the COVID vaccine. Look, here's what you can do. This is a Republican primary, right? That's what Licht said to justify this. Well, there are many positions that Donald Trump has taken in the past year that his base do not like. See, I'm aware of that because I follow his base.
And the vaccine is the most obvious. Yeah.
So I know what those things are. So I would have started out by asking him a question that I know how he's going to answer it, and I know the audience is not going to like it. And that's going to set the tone right there. He may have even gotten booed. And that would have thrown him off his game completely. So what do we know about, and the reason why he's saying these things is because he's already looking ahead to the general election. He's already thinks he's got this primary pretty much wrapped up. So he's starting to moderate a little with what he says publicly. So I would ask him, one of his things that he's most proud of is the COVID vaccine, Operation Warp Speed, which he says he saved millions of lives himself, right?
Yeah.
So I would get him bragging about that because the MAGA base hates when he talks about the vaccines. They have booed him before when he's brought up the vaccines. So I would have started out the first question, Mr. Trump, do you believe that the COVID vaccines that were approved during your administration were safe and effective? Because I know everyone in that audience wants him to say no. And I know he's going to say yes.
He can't do it because he took the vaccines himself, famously. And he is somebody that they revere, but there are always going to be policy issues that not everyone is going to agree on. So call him out for those. Right. On abortion, he refused to be kind of held down, didn't he? You know, he was like, I'm going to make a decision and I'll do what's best for the country.
He blames what happened in the midterms on abortion. Okay. He doesn't blame himself for endorsing and choosing poor candidates. So his cop-out, his default is abortion. We lost because we were too militant about abortion. So he is already, he's made several statements in podcast interviews about abortion, basically advising Republicans to stop talking about it, you know, and to leave it up to the states. Well, here's the problem. His base is pro-life. His base believes abortion is murder. Donald Trump does not believe that. Okay. Donald Trump doesn't want to talk about abortion. So what I would do is, again, put a wedge between him and his base. Donald Trump, do you believe that abortion should be left up to each state to decide? He would answer that question, yes, because he said that many times.
Yeah.
I would want to leave it up to the states. I wanted to get Roe overturned for that reason. Do you also believe that abortion is murder? Well, yes, I do, because he has to say that too. Well, wait a minute. So it's okay for you to have some states have murder of an infant child be legal. That's okay with you, Mr. Trump? And I'm driving a wedge between him and the evangelicals because, look, the deal that he made with the evangelicals is over with. The deal he made is they would hold their nose and vote for this guy who they don't particularly like because he's going to put 3 justices on the Supreme Court to overturn Roe. Well, that's done. That deal's over with. They got what they wanted. So he's got to make a new bargain with them.
Yeah, he said, I did Roe. You know, he tried to take the credit for that.
That's water under the bridge.
He then started to peddle this lie about Democrats who like to abort babies at 7 or 8 or 9 months or even after they've been born. And then he said that Democrats execute babies at full term. I mean, where does this stuff even come from? I mean, how has this been allowed to become a thing?
It comes from who he listens to, which is the very far right fringes of the internet. And that's who he listens to these days. And that's his Achilles heel. And that's what you have to do. You have to continue to go at him with what his followers believe, which are some crazy extreme things. And you need to smoke them out into the mainstream. And you need to say, Donald Trump, your believers believe that COVID was intentionally unleashed on the world by the Chinese Communist Party in order to defeat you as president. This is what 20-30% of his base believes that. Do you believe that, Mr. Trump? So either he's going to say, no, I think that 20% of my base is nuts, or I'm going to agree with them and everybody else is going to think he's nuts. You can keep doing that. With abortion, he comes up, he hears these crazy things from his son and from Stephen Miller, and he repeats them, but he doesn't know what he's talking about. So you have to pin him down. You have to say, Mr. Trump, where is this happening? Where are our babies being executed by their mothers in hospitals? What states? Which politician believes that should be legal? Does Joe Biden think that should be legal? These are the questions that must be asked. And that's why it's so frustrating for me to have watched that nonsense.
Ron, it was frustrating for all of us. I actually turned it off after 20 minutes. I had to go and have a cup of tea. I came back to
Hopefully
it on
it was
the replay.
chamomile.
I couldn't. It was. I just couldn't handle it. Based on the fact that none of this interrogation was done, does it suggest to you that it wasn't done because they didn't want to? Because CNN's ownership is now very much on to the right of center. They're trying to get viewers. They're trying to win back viewers that they lost to Fox. And that really this was just about a circus sensationalist. I mean, there's a rumor that the new boss of CNN actually said to Trump before the show, just go out there and have fun.
Yeah. But see, you can do things like that and not me. I mean, as a trial lawyer, look, I've said that to my adversaries all the time, 5 minutes before I'm going to go, tear their heads off. I mean, you want them to let their guard down. You want them to be relaxed. I mean, so no, I don't really buy into the fact that CNN is trying to be Fox. I'm sure they would like to have some of the Fox viewers. And I think to some extent they are trying to do that. They're definitely trying to move away from where they were in 2020 and 2019, which was definitely an anti-Trump network, and try and play it more straight news. And I don't have an issue with that. But I really think it's more of an issue of negligence. And the reason why I believe that is because it's not just CNN. I mean, I see this across all networks about their lack of understanding about what is happening in the MAGA movement, because we also tend to over-focus on Trump and not focus on the people influencing Trump and the people behind Trump and putting ideas and words in his mouth and in his head. And I think you can't understand Trump without understanding the movement behind him. And this is where many journalists, they don't get that.
Would I be right in saying that the only original idea that Trump has ever had is Space Force?
I don't know. That's a good question. I don't think he has many. He doesn't have many original ideas. He doesn't.
I mean, he relies on, originally it was Steve Bannon. Now, as you said, right, you've got the Stephen Millers and the likes. And just to be clear, about who people like Stephen Miller are. I mean, these are far-right, very dangerous, extremist Christian nationalists. These people are not your kind of run-of-the-mill political advisors by any
I just posted an hour ago Stephen Miller running a commercial for people to hire him as an attorney if you're white and you've been discriminated against because you're white. He's running ads for, that's who we're talking about. Yeah. They're very extreme. The people around Rick Grinnell is his, foreign policy, and Kash Patel advise him on his foreign policy stuff. Domestic, he's got Jason and Stephen Miller. You got Don Jr. in there. You got Kim Guilfoyle with her fingers in there too. It's a mess. And so I watch all of those people. I watch their podcasts. I follow them on social media. That's how I have a better understanding of Trump, because I understand everyone around Trump.
Let's talk about what happened the day before this TV event. And that was Trump being found liable for sexual abuse and defamation in the E. Jean Carroll trial, and he had to cough up $5 million. The very next day, he's on the television being treated like a superstar, and then he goes on to defame E. Jean Carroll even more and refers to her in the most disgraceful language, and apparently she's going to now sue him again. I mean,
I think that shocked a lot of people, but I hear him say this stuff 5 times a day. Yeah. So, I thought that was the best part of the town hall as far as hurting him goes, especially with women. I think that hurt him, his way he handled that. And I've heard that from some of a broad spectrum of people. So I think
it wasn't very good for E. Jean Carroll watching, or any of the 26 women that have accused him of sexual assault. No. And this is the problem, isn't it? That he just doesn't care. I mean, he was asked about this Access Hollywood moment as well, and he still doubled down. Answer. Women just let you do it. When you're famous, they just let you do it. I mean, this is like years on from him, from that tape being released. 2016, that tape came out. didn't hurt him as president, and he's still using it as a campaign vehicle.
I think that a lot of people like us we watch something like that and we're just horrified and shocked. But what I think we don't really understand it until we actually see it is there are actually people who love Donald Trump because of the Access Hollywood tape. Right. They like the rogue. They like the boorish, I'm a star, wannabe celebrity. They like the machismo. This is what they love about Trump. So he's not going to move away from that because that's what his people like about him.
But they also like the fact that he's a fraudster. They also like the fact that he's a liar. They also like the fact that he paints himself as a kind of anti-politician and anti-establishment and, anti-deep state and all of these things that are far from the truth. I mean, he is the establishment. He is the people he used to hang out with, the Jeffrey Epsteins of this world. I mean, those are his people, not his base. He has no common ground with them at all.
What's interesting is to watch the DeSantis people on social media make these arguments, which is, well, if he's really, when they're fighting between themselves, the DeSantis people and the Trump people, and I'm, of course, in the middle of stirring the pot of all of that. And so what I love is when they say, well, you keep telling us he's this deep state fighter. What did he do? He didn't do anything as president to fight the deep state. You keep telling us all these things he's going to do in his next term. Why didn't he do it in his first term? And then they come up with excuse after excuse. But that's why the DeSantis running is just going to change the whole dynamic, because it's not just the two of them fighting. It's the people who follow them fighting with each other that is important to break up this movement.
The notion of splitting the vote, I mean, this is something that a lot of people talk about, especially with Nikki Haley throwing her hat into the ring, and I'm sure Mike Pence is going to show up soon and do the same thing. This is at this stage, before the primaries, how much do you think it kind of changes the thinking of Republican voters? Is there any chance that the stuff that Nikki Haley says, for example, which is quite anti-Trump in many ways, she's much more measured and likes to kind of set the record straight. And of course, she had a senior position in government. Do you think it educates Republican voters who might give her a listen, that there is kind of a whole world outside of Trumpism?
There's the market for that is pretty small. And I don't think she's necessarily the right messenger. I mean, DeSantis could be, but DeSantis. I think it was Charlie Sykes or Tim Miller for the Bulwark wrote a really good column about this, about how DeSantis could go after the anti-Trump establishment Republicans, but he's not doing it. I mean, that's the mystery to everyone, and I think even his backers and his donors, it's a mystery to them, which is, he appears to want to fight with Trump over the MAGA base. And, he's not going to get a big chunk of that. He really needs to change his approach and go after the moderates and the establishments. But I think he's not comfortable doing that, or he doesn't know how. But he's certainly got enough advisors around him like Karl Rove who can help him do that. That's the smart play, because if he captures those Nikki Haley, type voters, and puts them with his other voters, I think he could beat Trump. I think in an electoral college strategy, I definitely believe he can beat Trump if he does it the right way. But I'm not really seeing that he wants to do it the right way. But the one guy I think who I'd want to see run, because I really think he's the guy who gets under Trump's skin, is New Jersey, former governor of New Jersey. Why am I drawing a blank on his name? Chris Christie. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, Chris Christie really knows how to bother Trump and get under his skin. Yeah. And Chris Christie would have no chance whatsoever of winning anything, but he will annoy Trump.
Yeah, he puts a good argument forward, doesn't he? He's he could take him on. There's somebody else who's going to take him on potentially between now and 2024, and that's Jack Smith. Yeah. If Jack Smith gets his way as the special prosecutor,
Jack Smith is why Ron DeSantis is going to run.
Right. There's a very good chance that Trump won't even be in the race. I mean, what do you think the chances are of that happening?
Yeah, I think that's why everybody's saying, all the Trump people are like, DeSantis is crazy. He can't beat Trump. Well, he can't beat Trump tomorrow. But, when Jack Smith indicts Trump for 40 felonies in 6-7 months, it's a whole different ballgame now. And that's what DeSantis is banking on that. And I think he knows that's going to happen. I think most people know, intelligent people know that's going to happen. And that's going to change the dynamic of the race. Is it going to cause the most rabid Trump MAGA supporters to back off of him? No. But that's only 25-30% here. There's plenty of other people that will go, you know what? We want to win. And right now, that's the most persuasive argument with the Republican base is Trump is a loser. Trump loses. He won one time, but he's lost us. Not only does he lose himself, he loses for the rest of us lose because of him. And so this is the DeSantis argument of if we try and go forward with a nominee who's under 40 federal indictments, we are going to lose. We can't do this.
DeSantis he might be his own worst enemy, Ron, because he's taking his Florida brand of politics and wants to kind of spread that around the country nationally. And, Florida is not California. Florida is not anywhere, really, is it? Florida is kind of its own place. And if you buy into that world, in fact, there's a lot of Republican Californians moving to Florida because, it's got a similar climate and they'll still see palm trees but they won't pay tax. Do you think that his plan, actually, DeSantis's plan, might backfire on the national stage?
Anthony, I was one of those Californians who moved to Florida. I mean, way back many years ago. But yeah, I moved from San Diego to Florida for that reason. Cheaper, low taxes, more humidity. But yeah, I mean, I've been here 30 years in Florida now and been, for most of that, active in the Florida Republican Party. And I can tell you over the last 3 years, this state has undergone a transformation politically. And it's because of what you said. It's that during COVID, a huge influx, at least 1 million people, moved into Florida from northern states, from western states, who are mostly conservative Republicans who moved here because they chafed at COVID restrictions in those northern states. And so they wanted to come here where DeSantis was advertising, this is the free state of Florida. You can come here and do whatever you want. We have no rules. And so what that's done is completely transformed the state politically. My town where I live, Sarasota, has always been a 52-48 county. Now it's 60-40, Republican. So that's why I've sort of written off Florida as a Democrat now. I don't believe we can win here. I think our time and resources are better focused in Georgia and Arizona, Pennsylvania, Michigan. Forget Florida. It's lost.
He's picked a fight with Disney, as we know, which is foolish because they're planning to invest, $11 or $15 billion over the next 10 years in Florida, and he'd be foolish to turn that down. But it's now come out that this kind of special jurisdiction, which he's kind of fighting against, to take that away from Disney, it's identical with, say, the Villages, for example, which is this, giant retirement home in Florida where, older people move to live out their final years in a comfortable bungalow. And yet he's not picking a fight with that special jurisdiction. I mean, do you think he'll eventually drop the mouse? Because he's not going to win, is he?
I think that I've said this on Twitter. He's going to drop his fight with Disney as soon as he's done with his presidential campaign. That's the only reason he picked the fight, is for this purpose, for an applause line. It's the only reason why he went to Israel. It's the reason why he went to Japan, is because he needs a line in a speech. It's the reason why he sent migrants to Martha's Vineyard. These are all symbolic things that have no substance, but he gets applause when he goes to Doug Mastriano's rally in Pennsylvania when Mastriano's running for governor, the day after he deported the migrants to Martha's Vineyard. And he says, yesterday I shipped 50 migrants up to Barack Obama's summer home, and they all stand and cheer. And that makes it worth every penny to him. So, and the Disney thing is the same thing. I stopped, I'm fighting woke Disney. But look, the second he's not running for president anymore, he doesn't need to carry on. And these are fights, by the way, that his fellow Florida Republicans in the House and Senate here do not want to have this fight. They have no interest in this fight with Disney,
I think that fake outrage is a theme of Republicans, isn't it? And yep. That's something we're gonna take a break quickly for our sponsor, but I want to come back and talk about this idea of fake outrage and Hunter Biden's laptop, which you could argue has been the last 6 years of fake outrage. So
sure.
we'll do that in just a moment here on the Weekend Show. Cold turkey may be great on sandwiches, but there's a better way to break your bad habits. We're not talking about some weird mind voodoo from your wacky neighbor or some sketchy message board. We're talking about our sponsor, Fume, and they look at the problem in a different way. Not everything in a bad habit is wrong, so instead of a drastic, uncomfortable change, why not just remove the bad from your habit? Fume is an innovative, award-nominated device that does just that. Instead of electronics, Fume is completely natural. Instead of vapor, Fume uses flavored air. And instead of harmful chemicals, Fume uses all natural, delicious flavors. You get it. Instead of bad, Fume is good. It's a habit you're free to enjoy and makes replacing your bad habit easy. Your Fume comes with an adjustable airflow dial that is designed with movable parts and magnets for fidgeting, giving your fingers a lot to do, which is helpful for de-stressing and anxiety while breaking your habit. I gave a Fume to my sister, and she was shocked at how flavorful and fresh it tasted. It's easy to hold and perfectly balanced, and quite honestly, extremely fun to fidget with. The real wood material and sleek design definitely classes it up, and she feels pretty cool holding it. Stopping is something we all put off because it's hard, but switching to Fume is easy, enjoyable, and even fun. Fume has served over 100,000 customers and has thousands of success stories, and there's no reason that can't be you. Join Fume in accelerating humanity's breakup from destructive habits by picking up the Journey Pack today. Head to tryfume.com and use code WEEKEND to save 10% off when you get the Journey Pack today. That's tryfum.com and use code WEEKEND to save an additional 10% off your order today. Support for the Weekend Show is brought to you by Manscaped, who has the best in men's below-the-waist grooming products. That's right, their products are precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. Join over 8 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with this exclusive offer for you, 20% off and free worldwide shipping with the code WEEKEND20 at manscaped.com. Look, everyone knows you have to be careful when dealing with the family jewels. You definitely don't want to use an old, crusty electric trimmer. That's why I'm excited to partner with Manscaped. Manscaped Performance Package 4.0 has arrived, and it's a game changer. Inside this package, you'll find their Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, Weed Whacker ear and nose hair trimmer, Crop Preserver ball deodorant, Crop Reviver toner, performance boxer briefs, and a travel bag to hold all of those goodies. First off, the Lawnmower 4.0, the trimmer. It's the future of grooming and, dare I say, the greatest family jewels trimmer ever. Their 4th-generation trimmer features a cutting-edge ceramic blade to reduce grooming accidents thanks to their advanced skin-safe technology. The Lawnmower 4.0 is waterproof, also has an LED spotlight that you'll need for a more precise shave. And because this trimmer is waterproof, you can say goodbye to the mess on the bathroom floor. You thought that was good, but want to take your grooming game even further to the next level? Well, the Performance Package 4.0 also includes the Weed Whacker nose and ear hair trimmer. The Weed Whacker is also waterproof and provides proprietary skin-safe technology, which helps reduce nicks, snags and tugs in those delicate nose holes. Their Crop Preserver deodorant and Crop Reviver toner will change the way you approach your hygiene routine. Manscaped even threw in 2 free gifts to their performance package, the Manscaped Boxers and the Shed Travel Bag. Bring your comfort and boxers to another level. It's time to take care of yourself, so go to manscaped.com and get 20% off plus free shipping with code WEEKEND20 at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com and use code WEEKEND20. Unlock your confidence and always use the right tools for the job with Manscaped. We're back with Ron Filipkowski. The House Republicans have unveiled what they say are records of $10 million in payments to members of the Biden family from foreign entities. This is the Oversight Committee Chair James Comer said Biden's relatives had used the family name to enrich themselves and the president was involved. Except he wasn't involved. The White House has called the findings baseless innuendo. The media is not really covering this story because it's been Hunter Biden's been investigated for 5 years and nothing really has been found. They really are faking outrage here. Tell us a little more about this story.
I have some advice for Joe Biden, unsolicited, for the Biden campaign and for Democrats in general and for the media on this, because I obviously am on all the different social media platforms, all the right-wing fringy platforms and stuff. So I saw all the Hunter Biden laptop stuff in 2020 and throughout 2021, all the videos, all the documents. I'm very familiar with what we're talking about here and what they're talking about, which largely the reason why most Americans aren't is because the media hasn't covered it. And what I will say is this: do not defend Hunter Biden. This is my advice. And Joe stepped into this trap in his last interview, where he was asked about this, and he said, what he needs to say is, look, this is my son. I'm standing by my son, and I'm going to keep it. It's a pending investigation. I'm going to keep it at that. He needs to say very little other than, I'm a dad. I love my son. But he went one step further, and of course, Republicans jumped all over it, which is he said, my son did nothing wrong. Now, I can just tell you, Anthony, having seen everything on the laptop, most of it, his son did plenty wrong. Hunter Biden is no saint, okay? Hunter Biden was very hooked on drugs, did a lot of crazy, wild stuff, a lot of illegal stuff, I believe, and I think he's going to be indicted. And so you don't want Joe Biden, I don't want my party's nominee, I don't want this race decided by Hunter Biden's character. Okay, so
who has never played a part in the administration.
It's just not smart not like for
Trump's
Democrats.
Trump's kids were very much in the White House. They were part of They were presidential advisors.
Exactly.
They had responsibilities. Hunter Biden has not been allowed anywhere near the White House. And
it's not smart to defend Hunter Biden. What the defense is what I say all the time, which is, what do you have on Joe? Because there's nothing there on Joe. Yeah. I've seen it all. There's nothing there. It's all Hunter. So, okay, the president's son is a piece of garbage. Okay, if that's so what? Who cares? He's not running for anything. So when you have something on Joe, get back to me.
But isn't that part of the problem that because Trump did turn the White House into a family business, there is a kind of projection on behalf of Republicans to think, well, therefore, Hunter must be involved in Joe's presidential work because he's the son, in the same way that Jared Kushner is the son-in-law and Eric and Don Jr. were always very much, and also Ivanka, very much involved. So there's this element of projection in the same way that there's kind of Republican projection about the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, being a kind of insider working for Joe Biden, doing Biden's dealing, which is not the case. But it was the case with William Barr when Trump had his Justice Department being run like a local law office and a personal lawyer. So this idea of positive bias and projection is a problem that needs to be considered.
I think their main argument is that Joe had to have been doing something for Hunter to get all this money, to get all these deals, that Hunter had no power. Hunter had no authority. He couldn't really do much for these companies. But the problem with that is Joe was vice president. What can the vice president do, to help Burisma or help a Chinese company? Not a whole lot. And the other problem is there's no evidence whatsoever that he ever did do anything. And Comer was asked point blank 2 days ago, can you point to one single thing that you think Joe Biden did as vice president that helped out one of Hunter's clients? Nothing. They got nothing. And that's the defense. Don't defend Hunter Biden.
But the laptop, this kind of laptop, which is really kind of the linchpin of the Republican policy for it's all they've got, right? Just this laptop. It's a bit like Pizzagate, isn't it? It's become a kind of myth. It's one of these kind of cult-like myths that is going to be in the ether forever. But when you actually look into it, it doesn't have any connection with politics or the presidency.
Or the government.
No. So they're not going to drop the Hunter Biden laptop rhetoric, are they? I mean, they're now going to run.
Here's what they know. They know that it gets under Joe's skin because Joe loves his son deeply. And Joe has been through a tough time with his other, he's had sons die and he's had a wife killed in a car accident. So, they know that Joe is protective and sensitive about this subject. So they want to get under his skin, and this is the way they see that they can do it. And I just think Joe would be very wise to just say, I love my son, and that's all I'm going to say,
It's very dark, isn't it, that a political party would use such personal jabs to try and score points in this way, to take advantage of, because Joe Biden is a good person, right? He's spent his life, you might not agree with everything he's done, and, he got into trouble with busing years ago, but he was a public defender, right? He has committed and devoted his life to public service. You couldn't say the same for Donald Trump.
Right. Yeah, his record is an open book. There's very few secrets with Joe Biden. Everything's out there. The things that Democrats have had a problem with him, back in the 70s, the busing, the crime bill of 94, which was very tough, that got brought up a lot during his primary.
Presiding over Clarence Thomas's
Clarence Thomas
nomination.
But it's all out in the open. Everybody knows about it. There's no secrets.
It's this idea of fake outrage is something that's kind of new to me, that I'm kind of getting my head around. And Ted Cruz is the king of this, isn't he? He's somebody who he says something that is controversial and outrageous, and then he is filmed checking Twitter while sitting in the Senate to see how many likes he got. Right?
Yes, he does.
To see the reaction. I mean, with your experience with being on the Republican side, some might call it the dark side of the force. Is it the case that now you see Republicans as baddies and Democrats as goodies? I mean, is it as simple as that? Because a lot of the processes that Republicans use, like this faux outrage, are really not. There's no goodness associated with this. This is bad stuff. This is dark stuff. This is really unhealthy just for humanity. And yet these are the types of things that they apply time and time again. And Democrats don't really use dirty tricks in the same way, do they?
Yeah, and another big thing that kind of dovetails into this is the owning the libs kind of thing, which is everything
now, isn't it?
This is something that really, quite honestly, I don't recall this existing in the Republican Party as a thing, 5 years ago, pre-Trump, to where you want to you revel when liberals are upset, when liberals cry, when liberals are depressed, or when something bothers them, that makes you happy. This is the owning the libs. And I see this every day with them. The CNN town hall, I mean, they're in all their glory, not because they thought the town hall was especially great. They love the liberal reaction to the town hall. Yeah. The fact that we're all upset by the town hall. This is what they like most about it.
Marjorie Taylor Greene posted a picture of her on the phone laughing about the town hall because she wanted to kind of gloat about the fact that it was a win for Trump and that the snowflakes were struggling and suffering. Yep. The problem with owning the libs as your kind of modus operandi is that when it gets as serious as not approving raising the debt, the debt ceiling, because you want to own the libs, and then crashing the U.S. economy and crashing the stock market, and that having a knock-on effect around the whole world economy, I mean, that's kind of irresponsible, isn't it?
Trump has been trying to get the Republicans in Congress to not raise the debt ceiling since he left office. And I've chronicled this. I've posted it. Oh, every time this has come up for a vote, Trump is out there yelling and screaming, don't do it, don't do it. And then a deal gets reached. Usually Mitch McConnell is the one who makes the deal. And then he screams about Mitch McConnell and how terrible he is. You know, the reason why because Trump wants to burn the whole house down and be king of the ashes. What Trump views is that the worse things get in this country, and he's constantly complaining how everything's going to hell, right?
Yeah.
That the worse the economy is, the better it is for Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Right?
Because it makes him look like a good economist.
Tank.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's rooting for that. And so what's the best way to accomplish a recession into the presidential election year? It's this. He doesn't care that it's bad for the country. It's good for him personally. And so that's the problem, is you now have these people like Green and even McCarthy who are now going along with this. The senators don't seem to want to go along with it. There's only 8 or 9 that do, but it seems like they have enough votes.
But you have to be pretty sick. You have to pretty much hate the country as much as you hate Democrats to want to take action like this that is going to have a knock-on effect for years and cause hardship for millions. It's just, I cannot get my head around how unwell. I have to put it down to mental health, because I just didn't know people could be that evil. I mean, and yet in the next breath, he's hugging the flag and pretending to be patriotic. If you're a true patriot, and if you are part of the government, and I see, and this is only my experience coming from Europe, even if you're in opposition, you're still involved in the government. The government is important. It's trying to make life better for everybody, and a healthy opposition is part of democracy. But to purposely crash the economy just to make the former guy look good, I mean, that is some dark stuff.
Well, it goes back to COVID. Look, just to see his psyche, he truly believes that COVID was done to sabotage him personally. Yeah. This is something that hurt the entire world. It hurt the Chinese more than anybody. Yeah. I mean, the Chinese have suffered because of COVID. Yeah. So the idea that, and he believes this, that they released this virus intentionally to hurt his reelection chances. This is what he truly thinks. That's how sick he is. So once you understand that, it's easy to understand how he would want the economy to tank if it's going to benefit him.
And this goes back to our first conversation about the responsibility that networks have, like CNN, to not platform this guy, because they know how unwell he is. They know how dangerous he is. They know that he is going to double down on things that are so dangerous, not just for the U.S., but for the whole planet, because America really is considered to be one of the greatest functioning democracies, or it certainly was until 2020, when he started to rubbish it. I mean, the knock-on effect, you could argue that the war on Ukraine is as a result of Donald Trump's language and misdemeanors. There are so many things you can identify around the world. Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil, or Viktor Orban. Mm-hmm. These people are all influenced by Donald Trump and his fascist leanings, but also his insanity. And therefore CNN really bit off more than they could chew.
Yeah. I mean, he says he could end the war in Ukraine in 24 hours. Yeah. How do you not ask him about that? How do you not pin him down on that? Yeah. My question, okay, what does that mean? Is the peace that you envision, what she said is, who do you want to win? All right, fine.
What kind of a question is that?
All right, whatever. Here's what I would have asked. Is your peace settlement, does that mean that Russia would have to return to their pre-war borders? Tell me that. Do they, in your idea, would you negotiate a peace where they get to remain occupying and conquering Ukraine territory? And then number 2, He said one time when he was pinned down a little bit by a right-wing interviewer, he said, we can look at the aid and money we're giving Ukraine as leverage to end this war. That needs to be drilled down on. What do you mean by that?
Yeah.
Because what his solution is he's going to tell Zelensky, I'm cutting off all aid. So Zelensky cannot prosecute the war if the U.S. cuts off aid. Right. So that's his solution to end the war. Why won't somebody ask him about that?
And also, and as you said, in terms of territory, he thinks of Ukraine as a shithole country, right?
Right.
That's one of the countries on the list. So as far as he's concerned, annex
this
parts
goes back,
of Ukraine.
No, more than that. This is personal for him. It's not the country.
It's the perfect phone call.
It's the perfect phone call. They double-crossed him.
Yeah.
They wouldn't. He got impeached because of Ukraine.
Right.
That's what it comes back to.
He has a vendetta against Zelensky because,
he wouldn't prosecute Hunter Biden, Joe Biden.
Play ball. Yeah.
Yep. And that's what it's really all about.
It's so interesting, isn't it, to kind of get in under the skin of this guy. You really have to put yourself in his shoes and feel what he feels, because he's very insecure man. He is not a machismo character at all. He plays that part. He knows how to puff his chest out, but actually inside a little bit of him is dying every time.
He knows how to play the character.
Is the guy who drinks the water with two hands. That's who he really is.
He knows how to play the character, but inside he's a scared little boy.
And that really is where Caitlin Collins could have played him. If she was equipped, then that's how you kind of expose him on the national stage, or certainly on television. Let's talk about another slippery character if we can, because the Republicans are having this was actually a double, wasn't it? Because the day that Donald Trump got done in the E. Jean Carroll trial, George Santos also got some bad news the same day for lying to Congress about being a millionaire and cheating to collect unemployment benefits that he didn't deserve. He said he won't drop his re-election bid. He's defied calls to resign. It was a 13-count federal indictment, a reckoning for a web of fraud and deceit that prosecutors say overlapped with the New York Republicans' fantastical public image as a wealthy businessman, and his fictional biography, which seems to it's one of the great resumes in history, because he made it up.
As an aside, when you talk about the timing,
yes.
James Comer and Jim Jordan are the gang who can't shoot straight when it comes to timing of things. They have this big press conference, which they've hyped for a week, and all the right wingers were all excited about this press conference. Yeah. The media and the left ignored it, but the right was hyped up. This was their big moment where James Comer was going to unveil all the evidence that they had uncovered. And his press conference was sandwiched between the E. Jean Carroll verdict, the Trump town hall, and the Santos indictment. All happens within 24 hours, and nobody paid attention to Comer, which was so perfect.
It reminded me of Rudy Giuliani at Four Seasons Total Landscaping, when someone in the audience shouted out, "They just called it for Biden." And he goes, "Who did?" And they're like, the networks. Oh, the networks. It was like, again, kind of the timing was quite remarkable.
Yeah,
but what's the deal with George Santos?
The funny
does
thing
he need to go quietly?
Yeah, the funny thing, there's the politics and the law. When I read the indictment, the most entertaining part of the indictment, and there's this thing, and I get this from my followers too, who hate right wingers, but there's something about Santos that people can't hate him too much, because he's almost like a cartoon character. They dislike him. They want him to go away. Yes. But at the same time, there's not the venom there, because it's almost like watching a reality show or something.
Well, maybe because they've seen him looking rather beautiful in a dress. It's hard. It's very hard to hate someone. I just feel sorry for him. He can be
entertaining. Really. Yeah. But the funniest part of the indictment was that he was collecting unemployment compensation. He got $24,000 while he was making $120,000 a year salary. Yeah. He claimed he was unemployed. setting aside all the stuff where you use campaign funds for spa appointments and clothes and, all of that, the brazenness of putting in for unemployment while you're making $120,000 a year. I mean, I kick myself now for not putting in for those COVID relief funds. It's like, seems like everybody got all this money and then it all got forgiven. I thought people were going to have to pay that back. So I didn't even try to get anything. I feel like a sucker now, and you got Santos out there getting unemployment.
On Friday, he came to an agreement with Brazilian prosecutors because years ago he stole a checkbook and he bought some $1,500 sneakers with these fake checks. And so he's agreed to pay restitution and fines if prosecutors agree to drop the criminal case in Brazil, bringing a resolution to this case that has tailed him for more than a decade. And even the retailer's going to get some of this money and the rest is going to go to charities, going to probably have to pay around $5,000. I mean, it's like, it's been going on his whole life. I mean, this isn't a new thing, really. And he's also very ill. He's a fantasist. And the thing about politics is that there are no qualifications required to kind of be a politician, right? It's if you can convince people to vote for you, then you could be the president, even if, you come with no previous experience. And America has proved that. And, I mean, around the world, that this is happening more and more. Look at Vladimir Zelensky. I mean, the guy was, he had a TV show impersonating the president, the president, and then eventually became the president off the back of it. I mean, if that's not the American dream, I don't know what is.
Yeah, I mean, the politics of the Santos thing is interesting. There are a couple things about that. Number one is we didn't pay, I blame myself too, we didn't pay enough attention to him when he was running, and we should have, because that's a 50-50 district in New York and very winnable for Democrats. And, we spend so much time worrying about Marjorie Taylor Greene and, these races we can't win, and because we really hate the people that they're running against, but we ignore people like Santos until it's too late. And so we have to do a better job, and I'm going to make a point of doing this in 24, of identifying lower profile, very beatable people and paying more attention to them, even though they're not, outrage specialists. That's number one. And number two, look, Kevin McCarthy wants to get rid of this guy so bad, but he can't. I mean, this is the problem. If the Republicans had a 20-seat majority, he'd be gone already. But they need his vote. They needed his vote yesterday on something, and they held up a vote because he was in court. So he's stuck with them. He's like an albatross around their neck. They can't quit him, and they got to ride him till they can vote him out.
Let's end just by kind of being more thoughtful about the kind of serious, dangerous effect of all of these characters on American culture, because the fake outrage and the lying and the smearing and just like Trump making stuff up. The reality is that people like E. Jean Carroll and all of these other women are suffering at the hands of not just Trump. Clarence Thomas has, been in hot water for years over this type of thing. And you also have the threat of fascism, which isn't really a threat anymore. It's very much with us. And for those people who've studied fascism, they recognize that that's what this is. And unfortunately, that word gets kind of thrown around, bandied around. But actually, to have a president that wouldn't give up his power, wouldn't agree to the transfer of power, who incited an insurrection, who stole classified documents, tried to overturn the election, all this stuff. The fact that this man and his surrogates are allowed to run again, and the fact that there are still an increasing, or certainly a large proportion of the country that is prepared to give him a pass on all of that, and they're just like they are with him. I mean, he had the audience in the palm of his hand on CNN. Now, obviously, that's not a qualitative, audience base, but across the wider country, he still got 70 million votes last time. There's still a large number of people that think Trump is the answer to all of their problems. And this is, if he wins, and let's say that Jack Smith doesn't come through, let's say that Joe Biden struggles or whatever happens in that area, and Donald Trump turns out to win by the smallest hair, what does that mean for the U.S.? You know, another 4 years of fascism.
I get frustrated when my own followers or people on the left say that he can't win. You know, I get upset about that because he can win. And we have to wrap our heads around that, and we have to take his candidacy seriously. And that's why I say you have to listen to what he says and what he says he's going to do. You can't ignore it, because what he says he's going to do is fascism. He says he wants to require all federal workers to take a patriotism exam. Yeah. Now, you know what that patriotism exam is going to look like. And if they don't pass, they'll all be fired. So you literally could have, you know, postal workers, just IRS workers, just mundane, routine people getting pushed out of jobs. And he says he's going to replace them with patriots. He's going to build 10 new freedom cities with no government regulations, elect school principals. You know, this is a fascist agenda. He's going to go after corporations. He's going to strip universities. He's going to confiscate university endowments. He's going to disband school accreditation boards. I wish the media and some people would pay attention to what he's saying. His agenda is a fascist agenda, plain and simple. And I think that when reasonable people really know the details of what he's saying he wants to do, forget his personality, forget his crimes, forget January 6th, what he's saying he wants to do in his second term. He wants Michael Flynn as his defense secretary. He wants to appoint Kash Patel as his CIA director. Pay attention to this stuff that no one's paying attention to, is my warning. It's a fascist agenda, and that part of this is being ignored because we're caught up in the personality. And I hope that when the American people, if they ever do see that whole agenda, which he's put out there for public view, they'll reject it.
People have short memories, don't they? I mean, I the thing about me making 5-minute news every day, which is, you know, just a 5-minute podcast of the most important stuff happening in the world, is I go back, and I've made over 1,100 episodes. I go back as a kind of historical document, and I listen to what I was reporting on a couple of years ago, or 2.5, 3 years ago. And I was listening the other day to the National Guard being on the streets and stores boarded up because of protests brought about by Donald Trump's rhetoric. That photo op pushing past protesters, peaceful protesters in Lafayette Square, gassing them, a military helicopter kind of trying to buzz people just so that he could have his moment, lying every day about stuff, even, you know, using the Sharpie to extend the direction of the tornado. I mean, all of this stuff was nuts. And it's almost as if we kind of romanticize about that period. But I was very depressed during those years, and a lot of people were. It felt like the country was repressed. Those of us who are legal immigrants were worried about our immigration status during those periods. We thought that he could just say, okay, everybody out. It was a very unstable, dangerous period. World leaders all around the world were really having to tread very carefully dealing with him. Most of them decided not to deal with him because they didn't want to get into a situation. Only Vladimir and Kim Jong and all of these people, they were the only friends he had.
And if you ask him to admit what his biggest mistake was in his first term, he will tell you that it's the people that he appointed that said no to him, that checked his worst impulses, who wouldn't, for all the things that you've just mentioned, there were 10 things that he wanted to do for each one of those that was much worse, that was prevented through a threat to resign or a cabinet secretary pushing back or a general. He wanted to do much worse than those things, but he was stopped. And what he has said is he will not make that mistake again. When he goes back in, he is not going to appoint people as CIA director, as FBI director, as cabinet officials, as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff who are going to say no to him. And that is why a second Trump term will be 10 times worse than the first Trump term. He's learned
retribution. He's
learned how to defeat the people who can stop him.
Yeah. I mean, John Kelly, we need to be very grateful to.
Yes.
Madison, anybody who took it upon themselves
Milley,
to actually
Esper,
pacify him.
Yeah. Even Bill Barr, who many on the left hate. Bill Barr told him no many times.
Yeah.
You know?
It's scary. And for those of us who have kids, I mean, this is the other thing is like, you know, I cover world news and I look at how the rest of the world is operating. And it has moved on. You could argue that the US is in some areas, not necessarily in tech, but in many areas is 50 years behind the rest of the world. The fact that, you know, abortion is even on the table is insane compared to other nations. And, you know, for those of us who have children who worry about climate change, again, something that America is not even seem to be bothered about because it has too many other short-term problems like mass shootings to worry about. And that is really the tragedy. If you just zoom out a little bit and see where America sits on the world stage, its position has changed significantly, and Donald Trump is responsible for almost all of that.
Yeah. Yeah, him and his political movement. Because I also believe that even if Trump dropped dead tomorrow, the problem wouldn't go away right away.
Right.
The movement has to be defeated, you know. And I think that's also a mistake sometimes the media makes, is that they focus too much on Trump and not enough on the people around the movement itself, because that's not going to go away anytime soon either.
And if you had a final word for Republicans who have been brainwashed into thinking that Trump is the solution to all their problems, to explain to them that Trump is not their man and that, you know, they need better representation, what would you say to people who don't care for the detail and they just want to own the libs?
Yeah, I would point to him how disloyal he is to them. I mean, how he will turn on them on a dime. You know, you just take Mo Brooks, who put himself into jeopardy on January 6th by getting up on that stage. And he was the most pro-Trump member of Congress on January 6th. Go down, we're going to kick some ass, he said, you know, up on the debate stage.
Yeah.
And literally, you know, Trump pulls the endorsement of him for the Senate race in the middle of his race because all Mo Brooks did was say one thing. He said, you know what? I think Donald Trump needs to stop talking about 2020. That was it for Mo Brooks. His 5 years of kissing up, of sycophantism towards Trump, he called himself MAGA Mo Brooks. His campaign sign said MAGA Mo Brooks. Trump pulls the endorsement because of one thing Mo said that he didn't like. Ended his political career. That's Donald Trump. And what I would say to all of them is, that's you next, because it inevitably happens to everyone, whether it's his wives, whether it's his attorneys, or whether it's senators. He will turn on you in a heartbeat when it suits him. So you will be next.
Okay. Ron, thank you. A pleasure. Really enjoyed the conversation today. Ron Filipkowski here on The Weekend Show. I'm Anthony Davis. Please subscribe on YouTube or as an audio podcast. And don't forget to support me and independent journalism on patreon.com/5Minute News. The 5 Minute News daily podcast. It's short. It'll drop every morning into your podcast app so you can hear me tell you what's going on around the world whilst you make your coffee. Join me next week with a brand new special guest and 3 more factual news stories to discuss on the 5 Minute News Weekend Show with Midas Touch.